Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In this video, as the title suggests, we're going to be discussing the business visa unit of the U.S. Embassy here in Bangkok. Again, this is just a brief overview. We're not going to provide a great deal of detail, but just sort of provide some insight into what the business visa unit does. There are certain types of categories of visas that don't really fit into the family-based category or the non-immigrant sort of recreational categories. So not tourist visas, not student visas, not things like J1 visas for exchange visitors, not things like K1 fiancé visas, not things like CR1 visas, IR1 visas, K3 visas for spouses of American citizens or stepchildren of American citizens, etc., etc. No, we're talking here more like E1 visas, E2 visas, EB5 visas, things of this ilk. These are immigrant visas, or I shouldn't say immigrant, I'm sorry, these are business-based visas. They may be of an immigrant nature or they may not be. They may be non-immigrant visas. For example, the EB5, once fully adjudicated and fully processed through, confers lawful permanent resident status on the investor going into the United States, whereas an E2 visa, although it is an investor visa, it only confers non-immigrant visa status on the investor in the United States. So they're qualitatively different. Some things to think about is the business visa unit is generally, or at least at this post, is generally going to handle things like the H-1B category for migrant workers, especially like skilled workers, usually in the tech industry. L1 visas, intra-company transferees are probably going to be dealt with in this by this visa unit. Again, not unlike the immigrant visa and the non-immigrant visa units, where they sort of have their own, I don't know, it's sort of wrong to like look at these as necessarily really, you know, divided or compartmentalized, I guess is the right word. They're not. And I would go so far as to say at smaller posts, you might have a great deal of overlap with respect to the officers dealing with non-immigrant, immigrant, and business visas. Here in Thailand, I think there's such a high volume that there probably is at least some general division of labor with respect to non-immigrant visa and immigrant visa matters, and business visa matters probably for that matter. But that being said, you know, different officers are going to rotate through, and Department of State officers, especially Foreign Service officers, including consular section officers, consular officers, are going to, you know, they kind of have a tendency to rotate, and they tend to rotate even sort of through different departments within the Department of State for various stints of time. So there's kind of, and there seems to be kind of a push to make folks, although not generalist is the wrong word, but to give them an idea of sort of an overview of how different aspects of the post are going to operate. And so I don't think it's particularly wise to look at this as like a hard and fast, you know, compartmentalization. For example, sort of analogous, to use an analogy or to use a false analogy, I guess, in Thailand, the business visa unit at the Chang Wat Immigration Office is pretty radically different than the folks that are dealing with like marriage visas and retirement visas. You know, the business visa unit over there, they have a very different set of criteria which they're looking at. They're usually wholly different personnel, and they just have a different set of blinders on, if you will. I think there's a little bit more of an era of a little bit more mixing around of personnel with respect to adjudication of immigrant, non-immigrant, and business visas. But that being said, each unit and the personnel they're in, because they're dealing with different areas of the Immigration and Nationality Act, different visa categories, different subsections of the Foreign Affairs Manual pertaining to the specific issue at hand, you're going to get different ways in which they look at things. So, for example, one thing that's going to come up in the business visa unit that's virtually not ever going to come up in an immigrant visa, sort of family-based unit, immigrant visa or a non-immigrant visa, is things like proving source of funds with respect to investments in the United States. It's a major issue with respect to like EB5 investments or E2 investments in the United States, and it's a major issue I've had to deal with when dealing with business visa applications here, is proving up source of funds. Where did the funds for the investment come from? Because the United States is not particularly interested in benefiting from the fruits of some kind of illegal or possibly illicit activity, And for that reason, they want the source of funds for a given investment to be proved up. This is not an issue you're going to see very often in the immigrant visa or the non-immigrant visa, but I think it's probably almost a day-to-day occurrence in the business visa unit. So again, this is just sort of to provide some nuance. I hope it's been rather helpful, but again, I don't think it's wise to look at these different units as like wholly compartmentalized and sort of almost blind to what each other are doing. But at the same time, they also do have rather substantially differing functions when you compare one to the other.